Welcome, everybody. Today we have the amazing Jeff McAvoy. Is that how I pronounce it, Jeff?
Yeah, McAvoy.
McAvoy. Okay, awesome. And today he's going to be walking us through Rive app. So Rive is a really cool app to do animations. And Jeff has been a pioneer on Rive for Webflow. So Jeff, introduce yourself and the floor is all yours.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, this is a preview of the workshop that I put together for the Chicago Webflow Conf for next week. And I asked them if I could practice it specifically with the Flow Party. And they said, yes, please do. So if you have any feedback along the way or at the end, I would love it. But yeah, I am been a Webflow user for about 3 years and gotten into the Rive platform within the last year, maybe 6 to 8 months or something like that, and realized that combining them can provide some pretty powerful results and some really exciting animation stuff. So I'll have quite a lot of demos here and a little bit of how to. So this is set up as a workshop. So I have some kind of presentation that I'll go through, and then I'll switch over to some live examples. And then in the chat here, I'm going to paste, putting together this page that I'm going to share with the workshop attendees as well, which just has some of the live examples. And then as I go and implement some of the Rive animations, I'll update that page, and you can kind of see behind the scenes how it works and then what it looks like on the front end too. So let me get started with sharing my slideshow.
Let me add you also as a favorite, as a facilitator, so you have all that access.
Awesome. All right. Okay. So the title of the workshop is Riveflow. Which is also the name of a website that I've been putting together to share resources about adding Rive animations to your Webflow projects. So it's about bringing your Webflow sites to life with Rive. So we'll talk a little bit about what Rive is and what you can do with it with a couple of examples, when and why to choose Rive versus some of the other animation options that are available. How to use the editor. We'll go into that just a little bit since we only have an hour. And then 2 different methods for how to add to Webflow. There's an easy method and an advanced method. And then hopefully there's some time for questions as well. And then I just shared this in the chat. If you want to go and view this, feel free to go onto that page as well. All right, so what is Rive and what can it do? I think the best comparison is to Flash. Decades ago, you could build entire websites with Flash. You could build games. You could create interactive animations. That's really the main strength of Rive. There's a lot of other strengths, but that's the thing that really sets it apart from other animation types is its interactivity. And so we'll have quite a few examples of how that works as well. Where Flash had trouble, or you had to install, the user had to install, plugins and keep them updated, and things would just often not work, and the files loaded very slowly. Rive has really addressed some of those, and so it's made to run anywhere and be pretty seamless for the user. So let's look at some live examples. I'm going to pull up this other window here. So this is one of my favorite ones I actually did for the Slater team as a demo for how to use their product. But I have this animation canvas up here. One of the things you can do with Rive that I really love is have other elements on your page control your Rive animation. So this is a form-based animation based on their sign-up form on the Slater website, which I think has been replaced now. But at the time, they had this. So if you hover this login one, you're going to get this little speech bubble. If you hover the forgot password, you get a different one. If you start to type in your email address, you get these little kickouts as you type. And then once your JavaScript level is not blank anymore, the sunglasses are going to flip down. And then you can, if it's blank again, it'll do that. So you can do that. And then once you hover the submit button, it's going to start surfing. So this is all set up inside the Rive editor. And then I'm using JavaScript code to hook it up to make this form experience a lot more fun. They also recently launched a text feature. And so you can update the text at runtime as well. So when they launched it, I happened to be traveling in Costa Rica trying to figure out the currency conversion. So I thought this would be a good example to test out and make my own converter. So if you type a number into this one, it's going to use that same input here. It's going to do some math on the back end with JavaScript, and then it'll populate the local currency as well. And then each time you type, it'll update. And then, yeah, you can type in a number that's too big as well. But that's an example of using the text feature within Rive and then animating it as well. Similarly, you can do that with something like password strength, where you can test to see if you're meeting all the criteria that you have. So in this case, if I start to type, you'll see that as I meet the criteria, the search bar or the strength indicator starts to fill up. And once I reach all of them, you get the check mark complete animation. And then same thing, if you delete them or type it in incorrectly, it won't complete until you meet all the criteria. You can also do things like have an animation that responds to your voice or to sound input. So this is another one I worked on for a Slater challenge as a countdown to Webflow Conf, which is in just 2 days, which is very exciting. In this case, obviously, it's reacting to my voice as I speak. So it requests microphone access and then uses that to drive this animation. It also has some cursor animation going on as well. This is one that's a little bit more advanced, but I have this art set up to react to my canvas size. And so as you resize the window, the art is going to resize with it as well, which means it works really well on a mobile device or on a larger window as well, which is pretty fun. And reset this one. This is a loading animation where you can see the dog's tail wags wider and wider as it loads. You can also have this interactivity happening while a larger site is loading as well. And then an animation play when it's all done. So a lot of things you can do there. I'll show this one too. This is a scroll-based animation. And let me just come back to the top. This is on the Riveflow website itself. Let me just refresh it to get it reset here. So it's going to happen over here. One of the things a lot of people are familiar with is scroll-based animation with Lottie animations, which I think is a really great use for Lottie. But with Rive, what you can do is continue to have animations happening even when you're not scrolling. So if this were a Lottie, if I stop scrolling, the file would just sit still. In this case, the propeller continues to spin, the periscope is going to continue to search back and forth, the waves are going to keep waving, and then I can also do something like once I get down past halfway, have these searchlights come on and start to search, and once I scroll all the way down, I can have a listener within this animation that will trigger a little Easter egg down here. So that's one of the things you can do with Rive that you can't really do with any other platform. A couple of other live examples on the Bones Co. website. If you get to their 404 page, you meet Tommy Tombstone, who's going to wave if you hover over him. And if you click, he's going to get a little crack and respond accordingly. And then on Flowman's website, for Corey Runnels, he's got his character, and he asked me to help animate this waving cape. And so I was able to create an animation and then kind of like have it play back at different speeds to give it the appearance of a little bit more randomness, so it doesn't just seem like a continuous loop. And I think that's it. I've got a couple other pulled up, which maybe I'll come back to if we have time, some games and things like that. Oh yeah, we could definitely put a 404 animation on the Flow Party site. That would be fun.
Yeah, that would be so cool. I would love that.
Yeah, I'm definitely up for that. That would be a lot of fun.
Yay.
Nice. All right, where did I put my animation? Sorry. Okay, now I have to go back to my presentation. Here it is. Okay, so those are some of the live examples of what you can do with it. Like I said, I think most of those are linked on the site that I sent. So if you want to go and test them out yourself, feel free. I love this this quote from Guido Rosso. He's the founder of Rive. This is just a response to something within their Discord channel. I asked if I could share it because I loved what he said. He said, "We're not just building a design tool that spits out static graphics or plays a prototype in a controlled environment. Building a platform that lets you build truly functional graphics that can ship anywhere." And that's a big differentiator for what Rive can do. There's two main parts to the Rive product. There's the editor itself, where you actually create the animations and the artwork and choose how it's going to be interactive. And then there are the runtimes, and those are the ways in which you actually implement your animations. In my case, on website with JavaScript, and especially with Webflow websites, it can work really well. They also have runtimes for Flutter and iOS and some game engines and a lot of other things that I'm not familiar with. Those are the two main things that it does. But it also lets you render high quality video. And so I actually just completed animation of a music video, which I think Nelson is going to be launching in November. But that was animated completely in Rive and then exported at 4K and edited together. So it's really powerful in that way as well. So you might wonder, like, why would you use Rive instead of something like Lottie or instead of Webflow interactions even? And so there's a couple of good reasons for that. So first, some of the main reasons of why Rive is really great. One is that it's super beginner friendly. It definitely does have a learning curve. I think probably every software does. But I think it's much easier to learn than something like After Effects. You don't need any additional plugins or animation marketplaces, anything like that. You can just start building right away within the Rive editor. And then you don't need to like render it in order to prepare it for production, anything like that. What you're creating is ready to run already. The file sizes are tiny. The loader dog one that I showed is a 5 kilobyte file. So that would be perfect for if you were loading a much larger site and you wanted to have something come up right away. A lot of the time, the file sizes for comparable animations in Lottie, they're even smaller in Rive. And so this is really super helpful. And then, yeah, logic, exactly. Yomi, you're right on. Logic is super helpful. And this is one of the really unique things. What I'm showing in this little screen here is the state machine. And that is how you decide when certain parts of the animation are going to play or not play. And we'll show a little bit of that. But that is what really lets you create the interactivity within your animations. In addition to that, there's also features like bones. So you can completely rig a character, whether it's vector or bitmap, and control the character that way. Could be a character, it can be any kind of artwork. There's a lot of power within the bones system. And then mesh as well. If you want to put in a bitmap image, you can apply a mesh to it and then weight it to bones and create this sort of faux 3D effect, or just lets you kind of deform the image in some really interesting ways. And there's a whole lot more to it as well. The motion graph editor lets you make really smooth animations. Follow path was a feature they released recently. Text is also newer, but super powerful. Exporting video I mentioned. And then they also have a community that you can publish to that will let you either look for other animations that are there. You can remix other people's animations. You can create an animation for other people to remix. That's all there under the Creative Commons license. And there are constraints which lets you control one element with the activity of another element. There's a lot you can do with that as well. So there's some of the reasons just to consider Rive in the first place. Yes, and then the seventh one, of course, is the runtime. So that's what lets you actually do these more advanced integrations. That does require a little bit of JavaScript knowledge, but as we got to see, I think it was just last week with the Slater demonstration, that is even easier to do now. So I'm not much of a JavaScript developer, but I've been able to use that tool to create all kinds of interesting integrations. So there's just a lot of possibilities out there. So when to use Rive versus Lottie versus Webflow interactions. When I say this is the most important thing, anything that you can easily do with the Webflow interactions absolutely should be done that way. There's no need to bring in a third-party source at all if you can do it with Webflow interactions. And there's a lot you can do with Webflow interactions. So I think that should be the starting point. But you do want to bring in Rive when you get to more advanced and more complex animations. And I will say I was never a very extensive Lottie user, so it looks like maybe I just don't know how to use Lottie for some of these things, and maybe I just found Rive as I was digging into it. But I think there's a lot of cases where Lottie can be the right choice, but I would pretty much always go with Rive if given the choice. So things like simple scroll-based animations, that works really well with Webflow interactions and Lottie. Hover animations, moving and scaling elements, cursor following, those things can work really well with Webflow interactions. But if you want to do something complex with a cursor follow, like have a character look at your cursor, then you're going to want to go with Rive on something like that. Anything with animated characters, if you want to have them be able to react in different ways to what the user is doing, Rive is definitely going to be the choice there. Anything with more than one interaction, Rive really excels at. The mesh deformations and animating loops at different speeds. That's the example I showed with the Flowman cape. Those can all work really well. And then again, Rive is going to deliver a really tiny file size for those animations as well. All right, so then let's go. We're going to jump into the Rive editor. So let me switch over to that. Again, yeah, feel free to jump in with questions at any point along the way. When I looked at the dates for when my workshop is, it's next week, and there happens to be a solar eclipse coming that will be visible in North America that weekend on the 14th. So I thought it might be nice to use that as a theme for some of the interactions. So created this eclipse tracker button. And so what I want to do here is first kind of show how I have this set up, and then I'm going to recreate it down here in the state machine so you can see what it looks like. So if I hit play on this, it's a button. When you hover it, the sun pops up, and the moon kind of comes up and blocks it, and the button changes color. And when you hover out, the moon continues on its path, and the button changes back to its original color. And then you can see, if you watch down here, what is happening with it. So it's going from an idle state to a hover on state, and then to an idle reset state, and then pausing at this idle state. So I'm going to delete this and then show you how to get that set up. All right, so I'm going to just delete all these. I'm going to kind of recreate it here, and I'll just delete everything I have set up here. And I'll show you, I won't recreate the timelines. I have those already set up, but I'll show you what they look like. So on my idle timeline, I have the artwork here. It's got, what am I keying? The position of the moon on a follow path. So it's going to go across the follow path itself. I have kind of squished down behind the button. And then the sun is hiding back there as well. So I think even if I hide the button, yeah, you can kind of see the sun and the moon are hiding back there. And then the colors of the text and the button shape itself are also being keyed. So you can see that with the blue diamond here. When I go to the hover state, it's just a single key here. So I'm just transitioning between these two states, but the path itself is stretched out into more of a circular path. The moon moves into this position up here at the top, and then the changing the fill and stroke for the text and the button itself. So that's what changes all the colors. And then on the idle reset, I have that here. I'll show you why I did that in just a second. But if I go into my state machine, what I want to do on this case is have it go from idle to hover on. And so I'm going to drag both of those states onto my timeline, or onto my state machine area here. And to control when that happens, I'm going to create an input. And I'm going to use a Boolean input. So you can create 3 types of inputs. There's a number, a Boolean, or a trigger. A Boolean is the one you can set to true or false. So I'm going to use that one. Trigger just fires instantly upon a certain action. And then number can be any number input. And so there's quite a lot you can do with all of those. And in this case, we're going to use Booleans. And I'm going to rename it to hover. And so what I want to do is then just set up the logic to make this work. And hopefully this is visible on the screen here. But I'm going to have it go from the entry state into idle. And for each connection you make, each transition, you can change the parameters. In this case, I just wanted to go to the idle state right away. But then I wanted to stay here until I check the box and then go to the hover state. So I'm going to make that connection. And you'll see if I hit play, it looks like it skips this one altogether, and it happens instantly. It just kind of goes right through it. And there's even a console you can see. It went from idle to hover on, but it happens faster than you can see. So what I want to do,
Sorry to interrupt you. Can you make the thing full screen, the window?
Yes.
Just for the recording to make sure that we can cover the whole thing. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Better. Okay. I think that's as big as I can make this part. So hopefully that's okay, cool. So then what I want to do is set a parameter on this. So what I want to say is give it a condition, and I want it to say when hover is true. So now if I hit play, it's going to stop here until I check this box, and then it's going to go there. And you can see, though, it kind of just switched instantly. It didn't really transition. It just, instantly kind of goes to that one. So I can also give it a transition duration. And I think on this one, I gave it a really long time. So it'd be a nice slow one. I gave it 1,000 milliseconds, which is actually 1 second. And then I can, let me restart the state machine. Now when I hit it, you can see it slowly transitions into that one. And I can also actually set the interpolation on this transition as well. So I can give it a curve. I could say I want it to start faster and then really slow and kind of ease into place there. So demonstrate what that looks like. There's that. So I also want it to go back to the other one when I say hover off of it. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab and drag a connection back to the idle state. And on that transition, I want to make sure I set a condition here that hover is false, so that it won't transition back unless hover is false. And I'll set the same parameters, 1,000 milliseconds. And I'll have this go the opposite way, where I'll have it, I'll have it start off fast and then end kind of slowly. Oops, can't grab that. There we go. So now, if I restart this, if I check the hover box, it'll go there. If I uncheck it, it's going to go back. And you can kind of see that it went back to the left. And what I wanted to do is actually continue on its path along the right. So that's where I actually set up this additional state over here. The way I am controlling the moon's movement is by, I should have started with this. Got to remember this part. There's 2 parts in the editor itself. There's the design mode and the animate mode. I jumped right into animate mode, but in design mode is where you're going to actually create all these assets. So I had this all set up ahead of time. But here is where you can see the moon is down here, and there's the sun, and then the path itself is here. And if I turn the path on, you can see it. I've got it clipped into a shape so it doesn't extend beyond the bottom of the button here. But the moon is on a constraint called follow path. So it's attached to that path. And I can kind of scrub through the distance here, and you can see how it just follows along that path. That's the parameter that I'm controlling to get the animation to happen. So I have it going from 0, not 20, sorry. 0 is its starting point in the animation, and then when it gets up to that top, that's actually 25% of the way through, which is also exactly where the sun is attached to the same path. It's at 25. So that's how I make sure it looks like it comes up and blocks it. But what I wanted to do, that when I have it transition back to the first state, it's just going to go back to 0 like this. So instead, what I have it do on my reset state is go to 100%. So it's going to continue back around this way, and then you can't see it, but it's actually going to continue the loop back to the first initial position. If I scroll past 100, you can see it again. But if I put it at 100%, it's going to be at the same position as the 0%, but because it's at 100, it's going to continue the loop instead of going backwards on the loop. So that's what the idle reset state does. It's going to set the moon distance to 100%. So now I can put that on my state machine. And instead of having it go back to the idle state, I'm going to delete that transition. I'm going to have it go back to idle reset instead. And I'll use the same logic. So I'll say hover is false. I'll set the same duration, 1000. I'll give it an interpolation curve. And then from here, I want it to go right back into the idle state. And I don't want to put a condition on it. This is, I just want that to happen instantly. So now I think I have this set up correctly, so that if I check the box, that'll come up. And then, did I do it wrong? Let's see, that should be happening. Uh-oh, did I mess it up? Let me make sure. Hover is false. Yep, that should be right. Let me try just doing that. Okay. Oh, okay. I had messed up the interpolation on it. I wanted to start slower and then speed up. So I think it was happening. We just couldn't see it. All right. So there we go. It comes up, and then it's going to transition out of there. Actually give it a little bit of a bounce. And I also want to make sure I turn the visibility of that path off again. All right. So here we go. There we go. All right. So now you can see it's working with this input, which is how you control the animations, but you can also set that up within the artboard itself with a listener. So we'll do that next, so that when you actually hover the button is when this is going to happen. So to do that, I'm going to select the button shape, which is this one, and I'm going to add a listener. And what I'm going to do is say on pointer enter, I'm going to set the hover condition to true, and then I'll create another one. And on pointer exit, we'll set the hover condition to false. And now, if I play this, it's going to work in the artboard and exactly how we're going to want it to work on the website that we put it onto. So that's a sort of a quick view into the editor. And I'll go into a little bit more of an advanced demonstration as well after this, but let me switch back to my presentation if I can. Does that make sense? Hopefully.
I didn't know it was so cool.
Yes. Yeah. And that's, like I said, that's actually just a very simple implementation, and there's quite a lot more you can do with it, but you really have a lot of control over what you can do with it and how it works.
Wow, I love it.
Yeah, good. Awesome. So then, yeah, the next thing we want to look at is like, so great, we've got that animation running in the editor. I want it on my website. How do I do that? So we'll look at the easy method first. In this case, it's actually incredibly simple. Once you've got your animation created, or if you find one on the Rive community or someone makes one for you, all you need to do is copy the iframe embed code and put it into your website in an embed block. So the advantages are that it's easy. The listeners that you set up within the canvas are going to work right out of the box. You don't need to do anything additional to that. When you put it into the Webflow designer, it's going to be visible right away, and it'll actually even function when you are in preview mode. And you don't need any third-party software or code in order to get the easy method to work. So let's look at that. So in this case, when I grab the Eclipse hover button, this is set up. It's working exactly how I want it to. And what I'm going to do is come up here to the share button, the share icon, and click share link. And it's going to open this window. You can set the parameters. If you can create more than one state machine if you want to. You could choose one of your animation timelines if you wanted to. I find most of the time, if you're working with the default state machine, these settings are just set up how you want, but you can choose to change those here if you would like to. And then you just need to click generate link. And see, I did a couple of these tests yesterday, but great. That happened really quickly, actually, which is awesome. So now I can come in here, and this is the code that I want. And you can see there's a couple of other codes here, too, that are really useful for other types of sharing. They actually have some specific code for Framer. But in this case, for Webflow, we're using the embed code. So I'm going to copy that. And I will come over to the designer on that page that I shared with everybody. Is it responsive? There are ways to make it responsive, and actually I will kind of demo that. It's a great question. So if I come into this page, I have an area set up for the easy method, and I'm going to come into this, and you can see I've just got an embed block here already. And I'm just going to paste in that code and save it. And it shows up right away. And then, like I said, if you go into the preview mode, it's going to be functional right away. In this case, you can also modify this code a little bit too, which will help with the responsiveness. Right, it comes in with the dimensions of the artboard as you have it set up in Rive, but you can modify that if you want to. So I could say, one of the things I like to do is make this 100% and 100%, and that way it'll be as big as its parent container, or as big as you set the parameters on the embed element itself. So if I hit save, it gets a little bit smaller, but I'm on the HTML embed element. So here, then I could say, make the width 100%, but maybe I want to make the height like 60 VH. Do that. And so then as you make your embed element responsive to the different breakpoints, it's going to scale along with that. So then you can see it just scales up the artwork here and makes it bigger. So that's the easy method. I'll just add on this quickly. One other thing I like to do is also add this as CSS style within this tag here. So I would just add style equals, and then add width 100%, height 100%. I've noticed that this helps to control the size when it's looking at various screen resolutions. So on a super high resolution screen, like a MacBook Pro, something like that, I've noticed that the artwork can actually double, but setting the style parameters would help to control that. The tiny cow. Oh, that's a WebBay browser add-on. I forget it's there most of the time, but that's all it does. It's just there in the editor, in the designer in Webflow. That's not a Rive thing, although it probably could be. So then setting that helps to make sure that that's responsive and consistent across device resolutions as well. That's it. That's the easy method. Pretty easy. Let's see. And then I'll continue on. So then from there, we can go into the advanced method. And this is what's going to let you actually gain some control outside of that artboard space. That's what's going to let you interact with things like forms and cursor position across the page, things like that. We'll use the advanced method for that, and we'll see. Hopefully I can get this set up in time. So with the advanced method, that's where you can actually access these inputs that we looked at. And in that last example, we just have the hover Boolean box set up. But you can create multiple inputs to drive your animation files. And this is going to be accessible within the code itself. So I'll give a demonstration of how to use the JavaScript code to access your inputs and then control them on your live site. And then my pro tip is to use Slater. We got a preview of how amazing this tool is last week. That's what I've been using ever since I learned about it. I think I've been using this one for a couple of months now too. It's amazing. It's got the AI support built right into it, and it hosts the code for you. It's built for Webflow, so it makes integrating with Rive so much easier. So we're going to switch over to a live demo of that. So what I've got set up for this one is I created another animation, again, for an Eclipse theme. Actually, let me show you what the page looks like where this is going to be. So it's on that same page. If we scroll down, I've got a canvas area set up here, and then a small form here. So I want this to be able to interact with the name field, the email field, and the hover and a hover on the sign up button as well. So I have an animation set up to do that, and I'll show you how it works here. I've got the Booleans set up for the button hover, the email field, and the name field. And so let me just restart my state machine. I can make this a little bit bigger too. So when you type in the name, the sun is going to grow a little bit larger. When you type in an email, this animation is going to start. And then when you hover the button, the eclipse will come and show just that exterior kind of a glow. And if you were to uncheck any of those, like in that case, if I uncheck example or uncheck email, that animation is going to stop. And if I don't have a name typed in, the eclipse is going to completely block it. So you want to get all three parameters before continuing on to the submit your form. And so in this case, like I said, I've got this all set up. And one thing I'll show here, most of these are set up the same exact way, right? I've got the condition button hover is true, and it'll go back when button hover is false. But what I have here is layers within my state machine. It's another super powerful thing. You can create multiple layers, which means you can have multiple animations running at the same time or being controlled independently. So each layer can control one state at a time. It can play one state of animation at a time. So I've actually created, I think, just like 6 timelines here, 2 for each of these layers, an idle and an active kind of state for each one. But there are 3 of them. And then if I quickly switch over, I'm using the mesh on this. So I think if I hide my moon, I can show I just have to remember where I put it. Here it is. So this is the mesh that I have set up. So I brought in this image of the sun, and then you can see there's bones here, and the colors that you see here are how it's weighted to each of these bones, and that controls how it's animated. So I think I might actually be able to have the mesh turned on. Yeah. So there you can see the mesh, how the mesh is deforming the artwork itself. It works really well for kind of subtle motions like that. But again, that's sort of one of the most powerful features of Rive. So to get this running on a website, I'm going to download the .riv file. So you just come up to that same share button, and then you go to download, and you're going to save the .riv file. And then with the advanced runtime, you do need to host the file somewhere else. Unfortunately, Webflow doesn't host .riv files, so you have to find a third-party hosting. But I've been using this one called Upload Care. I'm using a free account, and you can see I've uploaded this one a couple of times here already. And you literally just drag it and drop it. So if I drag it from off screen into here, It's going to upload. In this case, my files, it's 57 kilobytes, and I can copy the URL here, and that's going to work. Yes, and I do hope it's yet. If Webflow hosted the RIV files, that would be incredible. But luckily, UploadCare does seem to be pretty stable and fast. So I'm finding that it works well as a third-party solution. And then I'm going to use Slater. So I got this. This is already all set up because I wanted to test this out and make sure it works. But I'll show what it would look like to create this from scratch as well. So, but this is the code that is going to make it function. And so I'll talk about what it is here. And this is where I'm going to paste that the file that I just copied as the source here. So actually, let me look into the Webflow backend first, because I want to show you what code I have in the HTML embed. So to get this to work, you just want to create a canvas element and then make sure to give it an ID, because you're going to reference the ID within the JavaScript code. And then you can see I've set up the same kind of parameters as I did with the iframe and the easy method, with the 100% height, 100%, and then the same thing within a style CSS, so that it's being styled that way. But really the most important part is getting this ID in here. So that's it for inside the HTML embed code. Close that. And then back over in Slater, because I have the single script file set up, which means if I copy this code and paste it into my project-wide custom code, it's going to actually find, if I say we're to create a new page, it's going to find all the pages on my site and then let me create code just for that page. And so I don't have to go in and paste another set of code in order to get this to work. It's just going to work. So that's why I have this one with the same title as the page, Webflow Conf 2023. And when I save this code, this is going to run on that page and not the others. So I also have one here for that, the scroll-based animation that I was working on. And this one, I actually noticed Slater has a minor bug right now where if you have something running on one page that's broken, it'll kind of mess up your other pages. So I'm going to just comment out that code for now, because there was an error. But I've got the code here. So I think now, actually, if I save this page and refresh my site, I think this actually should be up and running. Let's see. Yeah, so now I've got the artwork is in here, and I have the logic set up for this already, so that I'm just going to show you what it does, right? So when I start to type into that field, that's when we have the growing action. When I start to type into the email field, that's when it's going to get the motion, and then hovering the sign up button brings in the eclipse. So exactly as it looked in the editor, it's just that I'm using these fields to control those balloons. I love that sound effect. That's great. And so that's how that works. So the code itself says, here's where I'm setting up my Rive instance. I'm just grabbing the source of where it is. This is where I'm getting the canvas element, and I have it. It's called Eclipse Club Canvas, because that's the thing I made up for this one. You name the artboard that you had set up. I had made a second artboard, so this is new artboard 2. The state machine within that artboard, state machine 1 is the default usually, but if you change it or rename it, you want to make sure to call the correct one here. And then here's where I'm getting those inputs. So I'm saying I'm creating a new variable called name bool for Boolean, and I'm finding the input by name. And in this case, if I switch back to Rive, you can see here's the names of my inputs. So I have one called name, one called email, and one called button hover. And that's what I'm calling in the code here. So I'm creating a variable for the name Boolean, one for the email Boolean, and one for the button hover Boolean. Boolean. Ooh. And then I'm using the logic. And honestly, I didn't write this logic at all. I asked Slater to write it for me. So I said, I have an input field with the ID of name. When it's not blank, please console log it. I found that if I ask it to console log it, then I can actually read this code and say, oh yeah, here's where it's starting to say name and then the value. That's where I want to use my name Boolean. So then I use name bool dot value equals true, because I want to set that checkbox to true. And then when it's anything other than that, I want to set the checkbox to false. So that's why if I go back and I empty out this field, it's going to uncheck the box, right? And that's going to kind of go back to its idle state for each of those. And then I'm doing the same exact thing with the email input. And then button one is just slightly, it's kind of the same thing, but slightly different because it's using mouse over and mouse out to set that Boolean value to true or false. And so this is how you do it. And like I said, it's really anything you can think of to do in JavaScript, you can use to control those inputs within the Rive animation and do some really advanced and really cool stuff. So I'm going to pause there to see if there's any questions or anything. And or see if hopefully I didn't lose anybody along the way. No, that used to be me. When I would look at code, I would just be like, nope, that's not for me. And honestly, it still is sometimes, but that's what I love about Slater, is that you can ask it for this code. Yeah. And a little bit of understanding of where to put it or edit it. And even if it doesn't work, you can just, Slater you can tell it like, fix this. You can, use the debug option. It'll fix it for you. So it's pretty powerful.
Easy. It's like app inception. It's like so smart. Okay, so Gabriel has a question. How about having multiple animations? Would you iframe each one in a separate embed? And if the answer is yes, does it affect performance?
That's a good question. Yeah, so if you're using the easy method, I believe that you can use multiple iframe embeds on a single page with no problem. And I think that when it uses that method, I've not seen it affect performance to do that. I think it has its own kind of like listeners built into it, so that I think it stops playing when you scroll out of view, so that it's saving memory. I'm not 100% certain on that, but I think that's part of how they optimize it to work. So multiple iframes should work. If you did multiple instances of the advanced method, you just need to make sure your canvases have different IDs. And then if you're setting up multiple Rive instances like this, in this case, I use this from the Rive documentation. They just use R as the constant value. So then it's like R dot resize and R dot state machine inputs and stuff like that. You would want to create a new variable for each instance that you set up, and then make sure to edit your code. So if you made one that was R2, you would have to make sure to update it any other place that the R is called. But then you can put those animations in their respective canvases and make sure the canvas is updated here as well.
So cool.
I want to undo that. Yeah, a great question though.
Okay. Does anybody else have other questions that you would like to unmute yourself and ask Jeff?
Okay, I have a follow-up questions, because it's like, isn't already coding, like, why am I using Rive then? If I'm gonna do like the ID with code, like why don't we already use JavaScript to do that? Like the whole animation?
If you know how to do that kind of animation with JavaScript, then I think you probably could. I don't know how to do that. And I think when it comes to things like, actually, let me go to one other example here. It's like cursor tracking. So here's one, right? I have this character rigged up, and he's going to follow the cursor across the window. and have this listener to do that. I don't know how to do all of that with JavaScript. But I would say, like, yeah, if you know how to do it with JavaScript, you absolutely could. It's just a way to control it. I think part of the reason that Rive exists too is it's meant to be sort of a bridge between animators and developers. And so it being an animation platform that has those inputs that are accessible within the code, makes it so that you can have a super professional animator create something in that platform. And then if you weren't also the developer, you could hand it off and say, here's what the names of the inputs are. But yeah, if you can do it with JavaScript alone, then you probably should. That would probably be better.
Yeah, cool. I mean, Parmesan powder, like literally just said, like you will take a long time doing that in Canvas 2D, which yes, is right. But like, I just wanted to know, like, when is Rive coming into play? You know, like maybe what is it? Like the only thing that you gotta do is like, okay, just select the ID, but the whole animation is already in Rive, so you don't gotta do anything but select different IDs for the canvas. Is that sort of the idea? If I want to do like multiple animations again, okay?
Yeah, I don't know. Can you repeat the question? I'm not quite sure if I understood it.
Well, the first question is if I'm going to use like multiple animations, if I'm going to use, you know, like an iframe, like an embed for each iframe. So then you talk about the advanced methods, which I'm going to be using IDs to select the different canvases. So I can use the advanced method. Yeah. So my question, like to follow up that is, so, well, not like, let's say not a question, but it's like, I'm going to be using like all Rive, like everything, all the animations I created. And the only thing that I'm going to be doing in code is doing the ID canvases. It's just to know, because then it's like, okay, if I'm going to go to advanced method, I also need to know code then?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Cool.
The advanced method, you do need to know code. Yes.
Cool. Okay.
Or be able to use an AI to create it for you. But yeah, it's based on JavaScript. So that's where I'm like, getting the elements by ID. And then you have to have those like IDs set up in Webflow as well, right? So I assigned the IDs here so that I could access them in the code as well. But yeah, to do the advanced method, you definitely do need to mess with the code at least a little bit.
Okay, cool.
Okay, awesome. Anybody else have other questions? No? Okay.
If not, I have a question for everybody, which is, does this make Rive seem more accessible or less?
Yeah, it does, because I didn't really know anything about Rive, because the first time that you came, I wasn't on the party. So it was really cool to see like how it worked and see that it's actually applicable to so many use cases, you know?
Yeah.
Yomi asks, can you import animations created in other platforms?
Yeah, I believe they have a Lottie import process, which I have not personally used, but I know a lot of people do use it. And I'm trying to think if you had like a PNG sequence, there's a way you could import that and animate it. It wouldn't have the same file size advantages necessarily. Although I do want to point out that when you upload an asset like an image, you can use WebP compression on the image, which is really nice. So that actually also really helps to bring the file size down. So if you were importing a whole sequence of images that you wanted to play into an animation, you could compress them within Rive to help keep the file size down. So there are ways to bring in animations from other platforms, and there are definitely ways to bring in artwork from other platforms. So you can actually bring in a PSD file and it'll keep the layers for you, which is great. If you want to mesh it and then you decide you want to edit the PSD later, you can just re-upload the PSD and replace it. It'll keep all your meshes in place and your layers in place. I've created artwork in Procreate to export with layers and then brought in to animate that way. Any SVG you can bring in for artwork. So the music video that I mentioned, I created all my assets and artwork in Figma, and then copied and pasted SVGs into Rive, and then rigged them up for animation that way. So yeah, there's definitely some other software and platforms you can work with. It doesn't handle 3D necessarily. So I've seen people bring in, again, this is more like a PNG sequence out of like Blender, for example. They'll render out a sequence of an animation from Blender and then have it play in Rive, and then also animate some other things. You could also bring in a still image of a 3D object and then rig it with the bones to give it some of that 3D type movement effect. But it is primarily a 2D platform, and I think they're actually pretty committed to that. I don't think they don't have any 3D on the roadmap coming up. But all 2D.
Okay. Is there a platform that we can learn more on how to use the app? Oh, wait. Just to follow up on Yomi's question, what about 3D objects?
Oh yeah, that's what I was just talking about how yeah, it doesn't handle 3D.
Oh, sorry.
Necessarily, it is 2D, but you can kind of fake it in some effective ways. Okay. And then yeah, for learning more on how to use the app, I've been learning everything from the Rive team's YouTube channel. They do have a documentation website as well. I find that a little bit harder to follow. For me, the YouTube videos are easier. I put a couple of videos out so far, and then that Riveflow website is where I'm trying to share what I'm learning too, both about how to use the editor and how to implement in Webflow as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, there's the documentation app link.
Perfect. Okay. Cool. Well, this was awesome, Jeff. Thank you so much for the presentation. Hopefully everybody learned a lot. Just share where people can find you. You're always sharing stuff for collaborations, whatever. Just like tell us. Yeah,
Twitter probably is the best way. So it's Jeff A. McAvoy on Twitter. That's where people call me the Rive Guy, because I only talk about Rive all the time, and how to implement into Webflow. So Twitter is probably the best, or this Riveflow website, riveflow.webflow.io. And I'll keep working on updating that as well.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. This was awesome.